this is, the last is actually, I think, going to go out of style here, which is conversion shops. A lot of them are overseas, usually in India or somewhere in South America, and you can pay someone anywhere from $200 to $1,000 and up to manually convert your file into an EPUB. So those are the different options. Now, if you analyze them all, I really see, okay, with direct-to-retailer model, they don't give you a way to get a full file back. So then you're pretty much beholden only to them. You can't really, you know, they have you by the short hairs. I think it's important to have your own file in addition to having it out there in retail channels. If you're looking at conversion shops, there's no reason to ever spend $1,000 on anyone converting your file. So I take those out of the mix. And I think the best approaches are either do it yourself or self-service. The problem with the do it yourself, while you can do it, is right now it requires a lot of tinkering and you need to know a lot of XML. So it's very much of a developer's kind of a world. And I think, you know, I'm just guessing you all don't have a lot of developers on staff, or if you do, they're, you know, working on more important things than just converting files. So with, you know, services like what we have, and there are others too, which I'll get into the next slide. You know, you pay a low fee. They'll distribute it to all the retailers. Yes, they will take a percentage of your revenues, and those kind of are all over the map, of your royalties, I should say. In most cases, you can get a full file. Talked a little bit about what it's like to convert a file yourself, and if you remember what it was like to make web pages back in 1995, that's what it's like to do it yourself. So if you thought that was fun, then you should go for it. I've actually taught myself how to do it because I'm that kind of person, and I would never, ever wish it on anybody. So there are some desktop publishing programs you can use. The major ones are Adobe InDesign has exports for EPUB now, and I believe that Pages, the document word processing program that Apple uses, has that. Oh, sorry. Oh, but then I have, is that good?
Choose your poison.
I got a frame, yeah. They will export your file. What we found, because people are sending these all the time to us through BookBrewer, is that they only work about half the time. And which means that if you send them to retailers, they'll either reject them, or worse, people who buy those books, you'll crash their e-readers. So I would say for now, I'd kind of stay away from those, unless you want to do a lot of QA. It's a huge pain. You've got to save chapters as XHTML, organize them into the folder, add other index files and zips. But it's possible to do it. If you do create your own EPUB file, make sure you use this tool called EPUB Check, which is free. It's from a service called Rainwater Software. If you just Google EPUB Checker, Rainwater Software, you can download this tool. And if you export or create an EPUB file, you run it through there, and it'll tell you if it has any XML errors or not. If it has even one, Apple won't even let you send it to them, and Google will outright reject it. So really, I think services are just the easiest way to go about it. So in terms of, you know, I'm not really, honestly, I'm not expecting to make a lot of money off news organizations. So this is one of my slides that I present to everybody. But there's a bunch of services. So at the upper end, you get higher level service and also a higher price with someone like Lulu. They can create an EPUB file for you. But you'll usually end up spending at least $300 because they're all about print on demand. And then there's a service called Fast Pencil. You'll pay about $150. We're in the $20 to $85 range. Then there are some free tools that are out there. There's one called Anthologize. It's a little bit buggy, but it ties into WordPress, and I think there could be some legs there in the future. And then there's Smashwords. They don't really have any tools. They require you to read a 70-page manual to learn how to format your Word document. It's really weird. But they have a lot of users, so they were kind of first in this space. So yeah, bottom line, there are a lot of different ways that you can get an EPUB file and also distribute. So how does this fit into news organizations? Is this the right distance? Okay. You know, I having been a journalist myself and worked with the news organizations, I know that there's a ton of content that can be repackaged. So I just listed a few here, but I'd be interested after this to kind of get your ideas on, you know, what else do you have sitting around in your archives, or even that you're producing on a regular basis, that could stand on its own as books? And it's very semantic, but if you get it into the right channels and then you promote it, which is always important, then I think a lot of it could sell. So you got multi-part series, celebrity interviews, collections of columns, restaurant reviews, movie reviews, and ironically even book reviews. Those are kind of in my mind what might work.
Just so you know, Dan and I have spoken about this before a little bit, but you know, in my mind as it relates to INN, when we have a multi-member collaboration, and some are doing graphics, and some are doing data, and some are doing storytelling, which is the fundamental currency here.
Sure. The
ability to be able to package that into a single report, like the aviation story, I think it's pretty compelling.
I do too, and I've talked with Dan too.
Yeah, and we're like, oh, and we're all just so busy.
Yeah.
We just have to find a time to talk, a date for date. But yeah, definitely.
But I think that's very promising. And what's unique about that for the end user is now they're getting multi-perspectives, now they're getting true multimedia presentations. But the problem, of course, is how do you do that efficiently? How do you actually package that stuff and bring it to life?
I think the packaging is easy. I'm curious about what your experience has been for happening afterwards. So you're probably
so the people that we're going after right now are not really like you all. They're aspiring authors, right? And they ask a lot of questions for the whole process. I think sometimes they think that we're just there to talk to them. And we love them, by the way, since it's going live.
That's your bread and butter, baby.
We think they're great, but there's just a lot of questions. But the biggest question they have is the most important one. After they publish, it's like, A, how many sales do I have? And when they see that they just have a trickle, because they fall into the if I build it, they will come scenario, right? And you're a previously published author, so you have to market your book. And I think one great thing about news organizations is you actually do have an audience that you can market this to get things started. That said, I think there's a much broader opportunity to find people who aren't your customers now, or your readers, to discover you through ebooks, and then maybe also become one of your users.
So how would this differ from building an app? An app where you put all that content in one frame. Is it different, or is it the same?
Well, it's going to be a lot easier to publish it as an ebook, and it's going to go out there faster because Apple spends more time. I mean, for Apple apps, they spend more time kind of reviewing everything. There are some content-focused app services you can use that make it easier. I met one actually at the AAN conference last month called iSites. It's by a company called Genly, and we were talking to each other. We're like, wow, you're like, they said you're like iSites for ebooks, and I'm like, you're like BookBrewer for apps. So there is some overlap there. I think the main difference is that with an app, you buy the app once, right, and then you're not going to pay for anything after that. With ebooks, people actually, if there's easy ways to, if you're telling them about new editions coming out, they'll just buy the next ebook for another, $3 or $4. But you have to market to them and tell them about it. So people buy the ebooks. They're also available on more devices, so e-readers is a huge part of that. And with apps, there are no apps for e-readers.
Are the e-books available if you have a laptop?
Yes, they are. So I'll get into that a little bit later, but there's, let's say that you're an Amazon Kindle reader, or you just buy an ebook through Amazon, you don't have the e-reader, then you can download, I think they even call it a desktop app, but it's for Mac or PC, and then you can read it there. And then what's cool with Amazon is that if you then one day get a Kindle, it'll remember where you last read in the different books and any bookmarks, and they show up there. If you get the Kindle app for the iPhone or iPad or Android, then it has this memory of kind of what you've done, so you can move between them all.
So in your hockey stick chart there, with projected growth in book sales, are those, I would remember here, the book, like a book, 1984, those, or is what we're talking about, or thinking about, I think, this group, for me, would be more of a aggregation around a story. It could be, could be a series, it could be around a series of stories, environmental issues. But what do you see the consumer, what do they like? What is there a niche? Is there,
so ProPublica just started publishing some of its content as ebooks. I'm trying to remember the sales. I was looking for that. You emailed it to me.
You're talking about Kindle singles.
Yeah, the Kindle singles. Before Amazon forced them to make it for free, which I thought was totally bogus.
Right.
But I think they sold about 3,000 copies of one book that was like one story, which is kind of interesting.
So is it?
So people are buying it, but again, I think branding becomes important. I think marketing becomes important. It's just putting it out there. You know, you're just throwing something in the ocean. But if people know that it's out there, then they
So
tend to buy it.
we're thinking in terms of books, I think, and because we're probably old, you know, maybe think slightly old-fashioned. I think would it be more accurate to think of these as, you know, the way you can on a Kindle you can buy that day's edition of it, like 50 different newspapers. It's almost like instead of an e-book, it's almost like buying an edition of a magazine or a newspaper. If you're just like publishing a package of stories.
You know, I think it depends. So, you know, one example, unfortunately, they never ended up publishing this, but the Daily Camera had a whole series of stories about is it Scott Kimball, the FBI informant, and then they put up a blog about it. If you go to, I think it's scottkimball.com or something, then they have all the stories there, and they're actually organized in chapters. And so it's like a CSI kind of, you know, detective story. All right. Well, then they planned on publishing it, and then when I talked to them, they said, "Oh, you can just do it as an ebook. This is great." But then they actually got caught up in media news group politics, so never happened.
Well, you know, Mark's hiking book is actually a bunch of columns that he did for the camera on hiking, and then he went back and edited his snark back into them. And
Oh, is that what happened?
How he would have written.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure he probably had the originals.
I always wondered how he got permission to publish that as his own.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't
And
write them quite that way, but he put his snark back in. And now he hasn't marketed the stuff at all. I mean,
yeah,
he hasn't even
is
put it on his Facebook page.
this is the book they're talking. I should like hold it up to the audience.
What's it called?
I don't know. It's called The Insolent Guide to Colorado Hiking. And I'll pass it around too so people can see it here. But what's great is you have a collection of all these different hikes. And it's a hiking guide, right? So I thought this was such a great example for me as someone living in Colorado, because I buy these hiking guides and they sit in my shelf, and then when I'm out there and need them, I don't have them, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to carry my entire bookshelf in the back of my car. Now for the first time, it's like there's a whole new audience for this kind of content. I'll just pass my iPhone around. Don't answer the phone.
So the advantage to that then be that publishers keeping more money than if they did it as an app, because it seems like an obvious iPhone app or Android app.
Well,
as well.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting question. I think that people are buying the ebooks as books and paying what they pay for them because they think of them as books. And I mean, it's another weird case where it's like, why is someone, you know, why are people buying this content over in this channel when it's packaged this way, but not over there? Because from what I understand, a lot of magazine, you know, news-based apps actually haven't been doing so well in terms of ROI. So, you know, but people are buying them here, and the cost to produce is so much lower. You don't need to create your own app. You don't need to then, you know, I have a feeling also that when people are looking for books, the idea of going through an app store doesn't really compute.
But you're talking here about every time you publish a book, you know, even on a service as reasonably priced as yours, you're talking 10 or 20 bucks a pop, right? So it does add up eventually if you're the publisher, if you're not going to probably make a huge amount of money back on it.
Well, but I mean, you would make that back pretty quickly if you're marketing it. So, you know, we've had some books that have sold 200 copies in the first few weeks. And actually, most of that we just send right back to the authors. So, and they market it.
So, you know, I think there's a couple of interesting, you know, things. You have an ageism issue, right? Or not an ageism issue, but you have a differentiation in the way people read content and perceive digital assets. So that's one issue. So for example, I think Flipboard on the iPad, which I love too, right? I mean, you know, it's RSS. The publisher doesn't have to worry about anything, just make sure that your RSS feed's going in there. But it's purely intent driven by the end user. What I think is interesting about this is, you know, I think of the days when we used to, at Variety, we used to like charge $20,000 to have a white paper on the site, okay? And you know, PwC and folks like that would pay all this money so they could write the white paper about this and that. But I think from an investigative journalism standpoint, when you are Rocky Mountain or your CII, if you could see, you know, go to our library essentially and then buy prior reports or subscribe to ongoing reports, I think that's a different transaction ROI than buy my app and see if this is relevant to you. Because I think the number one problem with apps is that app fatigue. You're scrolling, oh, I haven't looked at that in ages, right? It's different when there's that, I'm expecting it. It's almost like taking that hybrid magazine approach.
So you're talking about subscriptions too then?